Welcome to our Art as Prayer workshop. I'm Mandy Smith and I'm the pastor at University Christian Church here in Cincinnati, Ohio, up by the University of Cincinnati. I'm an artist myself, and it's been an interesting journey for me to try to figure out how to be a lead pastor and bring those creative gifts into that work at the same time. And I wanted to welcome everybody, whether you consider yourself an artist or not. What we're going to be doing today is not really about having great artistic skill. In fact, in some ways, we're going to need to set aside whatever ways that we already feel we're good at this in order to receive the invitation that comes, because this is art as prayer. And so I just want to, if anyone is having anxiety about performance in art class, or the first time that somebody asked you what on earth it was that you had just created, this is a moment to be released from that. And in fact, in some ways, some of the things that we're going to be doing are quite countercultural and quite different from many of the messages that we get in life in general. So to release that anxiety and release that performance pressure is something that I think we don't often have the opportunity or the invitation to do. So what we're doing today is going to be about the process, not the product. So that's very much unlike our normal way of living. So you may come out from this with something that you're really proud of that looks good, you may, or it may look really dumb. What is happening in us is actually the point here today. And so release whatever anxiety you have about making something that looks really nice. Other people may not get it. Other people may think it's strange. You may not even like how it looks, but what we're going to do today is about something that we're doing with God internally, which may or may not look good on the piece of paper. I also want to release you from the performance and productivity kind of pressures that we have. This is going to be a way to rest today, a time to receive, not just to create and manufacture things. Something else that's a little bit countercultural about what we're going to be doing today is that this is an embodiment exercise. So this is a way for us to do things with our hands and our bodies that are related to the prayer that we are praying and our receptivity to God. And so instincts, emotions, and moving your body through making art are all welcome in this space. I love the feeling of how a pencil feels on paper. You know, if you try to draw on an iPad, that's kind of fun, but I miss even that sensory experience of feeling the texture of the paper under your pencil. So in much of our life, and sadly often even in the Christian world, our instincts, our emotions, and our senses and bodily experience, we have to kind of put over here to only engage as thinking creatures. Our intellect is certainly welcome, but we are also welcoming the whole person into this experience. And also, this is an opportunity to step away from worrying about what other people think, which also feels rather countercultural and maybe not our norm. So not that we can accomplish all of that, but I just want to set the tone to say instincts, emotions, and senses are welcome here. Resting and receiving is our posture, setting aside performance anxiety and being willing to receive wherever the process leads us, and not focus too much on the product as much as possible. It may be the case that some of those things just become really apparent to you. If you walk away from this just realizing how hard it is to do those things, that's a good thing too. So I wanted to set the tone with this quote from Peter Steinke, and I have it here that I can share on the screen. Some of you may be students of Steinke or Murray Bowen, or Edwin Friedman. They all work in some of the family systems stuff. And he says, in periods of intense anxiety, what is most needed is what is most unavailable, the capacity to be imaginative. And so while oftentimes art exercises seem a little bit like a luxury or a silly thing or something that's not important, I would actually say that this is really crucial work to set aside from the anxiety for a while and to step into a different way, a different place in our own hearts and minds and imaginations, so that when we actually return to our work and the important things of the world, turn the news back on again, we just have a different perspective. We have a kingdom view, and we are able to engage in an entirely new way. And so this is what prayer does for us in general, that if we do it well, it just allows us to step into the heart and mind of God for a while, so that when we return, we come back with new perspective and new imagination. And so in times of anxiety like we're in at the moment, whether personally or globally, imagination is actually really important, and helps us serve people better. So what we're doing will be fun, I hope, and relaxing, and at the same time it's actually really important. It makes me sad that oftentimes art workshops are a little side thing that people come to if they're already good at art, but I think everybody should be doing this kind of thing at the moment. So I wanted to share with you first, just briefly, how I came across what we're going to be doing, because it felt like a gift to me, and then I'll walk you through some of the steps yourself. So I was just doodling one day. It was when I was in a season of just despair, because I was hearing so many things in the news about church leaders who had made really silly statements that I didn't feel like they reflected the kingdom, or people, just the church in general was making headlines in ways that was breaking my heart over and over and over again. And one day I was just sitting, and I'm pretty sure I was crying and praying, and I was doodling, and I'm just going to make what I was doing here. So I was making very slow lines down the page like this, and I think they were almost like tears, the lines of tears falling down the page. I wasn't even really conscious that I was doing it, but somehow the very slow motion of just letting my hands sweep down the page and not overthinking it or over controlling it felt really therapeutic somehow. So I just repeated that, doing it several times, and was asking the Lord, like, where is your church? I long to see your beautiful ecclesia at work in the world. Where is she? And as I sat there, I was quite astounded, because a woman dancing appeared to me among the lines, and so I just needed to see her, and so I found markers and crayons and colored until I found I made this woman come alive with the colors. And so I'll share with you some of the early ones that I did when I was doing this. So here's one, and I actually set up a Facebook page for her so that I could share, because they're really just prayers. They're not fine art by any means, but for me they're prayers for our beautiful ecclesia to dance in freedom again. So she's at Ecclesia Dances on Facebook, and I say ecclesia because it sounds like a lady's name, and I guess it's the Greek pronunciation too. So that's one that I did at the very beginning, and I wanted to make her dress in that one like flames. And then another one is here. So this one I actually did over a page from an old book. So I've done some over different backgrounds as well that add some interest to it. So you don't have to find what I found in it, but what I found really interesting and hopeful and kind of strangely restful was that this kind of doodling, these lines just crossing over one another, just create interesting possibilities. So for example, the one that I've just done here, you see there are leaves that emerge. So I didn't really draw a leaf. I just watched where two lines overlapped and there was a leaf. Or you can see here, flames seem to also want to be found in these kinds of places. So if I wanted to make that into a flame, suddenly there's a flame, and I didn't draw a flame, I just found a flame. And all that I had to do for that to emerge was let these lines cross over one another. So it's almost like finding wood grain, faces in wood grain. If you're ever like lying in bed and you've got wood grain on the furniture near you or something. It's just fun to see those faces in the wood grain. So it's very similar to that. So it's an opportunity to kind of release and discover. So I call the process rest, receive, respond. So while we're making art, and that's the obvious thing that we're doing, what we're also doing is practicing that fundamental posture of releasing from our own control and receiving something that we didn't create. So in the drawing of the lines, I was just releasing. I wasn't controlling something. I wasn't even trying to make a picture. I didn't really have an agenda. I was just breathing slowly and doing something very repetitive that was strangely calming to me. Then in the receiving, so if I found a leaf, or if I found a flame, or in my case, I kept finding this woman dancing, it feels like a gift because you're receiving it, even though you made the lines. You didn't make a flame, or you didn't make a leaf. And but then we do also have an invitation to respond. We do have a part to play. We get to choose what color we're going to do, what lines we're going to fill in. And so I think this is actually a metaphor for how we engage with God in our lives. So this often also comes for me from Matthew 11:28 and through 30. So let me put that one up here for you as well. So Jesus says, "Come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." This is quite a strange conundrum that Jesus offers us in this passage. He reaches out and says, "Come, all you are weary and burdened." And we all just want to say, yes, that sounds so great. And he promises us rest. And so we say, okay, Jesus, that sounds wonderful. And then he says, "Take my yoke upon you." And so that's not actually what we were wanting from him, not what we were expecting him to offer us. We were expecting him to say, "Come sit by the pool and I'll make you a nice drink and bring you a book to read," or something. So it's a strange thing that Jesus says, "Come and I will give you rest, take my yoke." And so I think one thing that is maybe helpful here is to show this image of animals under a yoke. So we don't really do much farming, or I personally don't do much plowing or carrying of heavy weights with animals. But this yoke here is being used for the older cow. I guess this is the cow, oxen. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know the difference. But for this older cow to be training the younger cow. And the older cow is bearing most of the weight and coming under the yoke with the younger cow, so that together they are carrying something. But it's not that Jesus is saying, "I've been carrying this single yoke and now I'm going to put it on you." Instead, he's saying, "I'm already bearing this. I'm already carrying this work of making the world new. And I invite you to come with me. Set aside the yoke that you are carrying of you doing it all by yourself and join me in my yoke." And so we can see how there is rest in that invitation. And there's a beautiful way in which we see his joy for it, as he makes all things new. And there's a kind of a joy that we can learn as we come in under the yoke in the way that Jesus does. So before we actually jump into the exercise, I wanted to show you one last thing that I found really helpful to just compare the way that the world offers us a yoke compared to how Jesus offers us this yoke. And this has been helpful for me to think about the choices that we make and how we bear the burden of what we're doing in our lives. So you'll see here, this is how I've drawn the world's yoke. And let me just minimize a few things here so I can get to this image myself so that I can see what you're looking at. Okay, so so we have, if we start here on the left, any question we have, any problem we have, any task we are handed, the world teaches us respond, respond, respond. Question, answer it. Problem, fix it. Conundrum, solve it. And even as Christians, we still get caught up in that habit, unfortunately. And so if you follow, I don't think this is actually a flow chart, but I'm going to call it a flow chart. If you follow the different options that come from this, so we are continuing in that respond, respond, respond kind of habit of bearing the burden on our own. And if that has happy outcomes, as you see in the top image here, then that just makes us think, oh, well, I must be good at this. I'm going to continue in that cycle. I'm just going to keep trusting my own abilities, trusting my own skills. I'm going to keep answering all the questions and solving all the problems, and that's working really well for me. The problem is that that often doesn't work all the time. And so then it has a less than ideal outcome, that we tried to solve something and it blew up in our faces, that we tried to answer the questions and we couldn't find the answers. And this feels in our culture like a moment of despair and a moment of failure. But I think this is a really sacred moment, because it actually is a moment where we confront our fundamental human limitation, and it's an invitation to discover something else. But the sad thing is, I think that oftentimes it's people with more privilege, people with more resources who are able to be stuck in the happy loop at the top, where this seems to be working for us. We seem to be able to figure this out. We have the technology. We can figure this. We can fix these problems. And so they just keep thinking, well, what's wrong with everybody else? Nobody else seems to be able to do it. There must be something special about us. But instead, we have this situation at the bottom where we can't always fix the problems. We can't always answer the questions. And the culture will keep us back in this cycle of saying, well, just work harder. Just read another book. Just buy a product. Just go back to school. There must be something wrong with you, because other people seem to be able to just keep controlling things, responding, and getting on top of the problem. And as you can see, there's a little red dotted line here, because the beautiful thing about when that doesn't always work and when that habit falls apart is it gives us an opportunity to think, maybe I'm going to get out of this cycle. This isn't working for me anymore, so I'm going to try something different. And I think that's a really sacred moment, and a moment to trust that in our weakness, God can be strong. But at the same time, I think that according to the world's perspective, that is only failure. That doesn't have a sacred possibility as the world sees it. But as Jesus sees it, let me flip to this other one. This is what Jesus is inviting us into. So instead, Jesus begins with rest. So releasing of our control. That he says, come to me, all you are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And this may be literal rest, to go away for a while, to step out of our work for a bit, to start every morning with prayer or a walk. It may be to take a nap, or it may just be that moment of pause in a meeting when we need to make a decision, where we set aside the anxious respond, respond, respond habit. It might just be a moment in a conversation where we just take a breath and say a tiny prayer, or where we just say, can we pray for a moment here? That rest may be Sabbath keeping, and I hope that that's something that you guys are all exploring. Or it may just be that moment of breaking the cycle of respond, 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 control, 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 to release control for a moment. And in my experience, and in what I've watched with other people, every time we set aside that personal control, we receive something. Every single time I've seen something new break in. It may be an answer, but it may just be a different way of seeing. It may be a permission to take our time on this. It may be a permission to not have all the answers. It may be a perspective that invites different voices into the conversation. Something always happens when we rest from our anxious wrangling and stop. Then there's just a place where we've uncluttered, and the spirit that's already in us can finally say, okay, here's the wisdom, here's the insight, here's the guidance, here's the peace that I have to offer. And as you'll see along the way here, there's still the red dotted lines. At each step along the way, there's still an opportunity to go back to the old habit, to try to receive, or to force the agenda of how we would receive, to force the agenda of how we would respond, and to get back in control again. So we're going to have to fight that, release ourselves from that every time. But when we receive something, then there's an opportunity to respond. So I don't want to say that we have no part to play. I don't think that God is inviting us into passivity. And this is a great way to respond to the fact that oftentimes I see people say, well, it's all up to God, so I'm going to just do nothing. But then we still have to get up and go to work and do something. We're still called to participate in the mission. And so then we go to the opposite extreme of saying, well, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do all of it. And this rest, receive, respond invitation is a way to partner with God, to trust that we are not the ones beginning this, but we do have a part to play. So if we begin with rest, then we're able to receive from the one who ultimately is carrying the weight, ultimately is bearing the yoke, is on mission in this world. And then we can receive how we are called to respond in that partnering with him. And so it might be respond by just saying this one thing to someone, by responding to this email in this particular way. It may be a new vision for our ministry. It may be a way to resolve that crisis. It may just be an invitation to rest some more. But every single time we have an opportunity to step in and respond. Now, again, that has good and bad outcomes, however you measure positive or negative in this case, because of course there may be some things that don't feel great and that bring pain, but are actually for healing and goodness. So if we have an outcome that is obvious that God was involved, and it feels like, yes, I understand why God led me to this place, and we have happy smiles on our faces, that just affirms us in what we have been doing, and that sends us back to the rest. That sends us back to rest in God, trusting that he ultimately is bearing the yoke, and he is inviting us to share in this mission with him. On the other hand, and this is what's really helpful for me to remember oftentimes, even if that doesn't go as anticipated, even if I was trying to be faithful in resting and receiving and responding to what I received in that, even if people didn't understand it, people didn't agree with it, it didn't have the outcomes I had imagined, that is a moment also to realize how I had still held on to the agenda of what I thought God was doing in this. And it's an opportunity to remember that Jesus suffered for his faithfulness, that his resting in the Father, his receiving from the Father, and his responding to the call of the Father actually took him to the cross. And so it was not a way that he was rejected by the Father, even though it felt like it at times. It was a place where he just could go back in and rest even more in the Father, to say, I am in you, I am listening to you, I am following you, I am bearing the yoke that you have for me, and to find that solidarity in the Father, even when it didn't go the way that maybe he had hoped it would go. So I hope that resonates with you in some way. It's been really helpful for me to just unpack my own habits and the way that our culture has invited us to bear the kind of burden and the yoke that it would put, and how that's different from what Jesus invites us to when he says, come to me, you are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. This is the kind of yoke that Jesus is inviting us to: rest, receive, and respond. And so to step into the art activity now, there's actually 3 stages to it, which are training us in those 3 habits. So in a way, this is about making art. In a way, it's also kind of practicing those postures that we will then hopefully bring into the rest of our lives when we're making decisions and answering emails and running meetings and leading. So if you want to get your materials together, paper and a permanent marker or a marker of some kind, and your oil pastels or pencils or whatever other colors you would like to use. So I have some here with me as well. So I'm just going to give the instructions for each one, and then give some time for you to go ahead and do that in your own timing. So first of all, as I had described earlier, just take your marker and your paper, and we'll start with some time of prayer, and then you'll just go into about 5 minutes of making these kinds of lines, just slowly and repetitively down the page. The point is not to make the lines only. The point is to rest, to breathe, to be present in yourself, in your body, and in this space, and to release control. Don't overthink it, which I think is a good thing for us to practice. So if you have all your materials ready, let me just pray and have a moment to center ourselves before you go ahead and take about 5 minutes to do those. Do as many lines as seem right to you. You can always do more later if you don't think there's enough. And don't worry too much about if it looks like mine or if it looks like anything else. This is a time for you to be present and rest from performance anxiety. So just take a deep breath wherever you are. Feel the seat underneath you or whatever you're sitting on. Breathe, be in this space, and be aware of your toes. Wiggle your toes if that helps you. Feel your feet on the floor. Be conscious of what noises, what sounds are happening around you. And be conscious of the fabric of your clothing on your skin. Just be in this place, in this moment, in this body that God has given you. And take your time now. We'll give you about 5 minutes now to just slowly draw those lines top to bottom. Make sure they overlap one another. That's where the possibilities emerge. But don't overthink it. Don't rush it. Just breathe and slowly let your hand move across the page. We'll give you 5 minutes to do that. So we're done now with the resting part, the slow, repetitive lines. And now we'll step into the receiving part. So I'll give you just 5 minutes or so to just sit with what you've just made. Turn it around, look at it from different perspectives. And if there's anything in you that's worried that you won't find anything, then just release that. It's okay. It doesn't mean God isn't with you if this doesn't actually turn out to be anything that's really cool or interesting. I showed you some of mine that looked like something, but not all of them turn out that way, and that's okay as well. You can start again. If you just don't like what you see, just start again. Sometimes I've revisited something after a day or two and I find something in it. So you don't have to find what I found in mine. I kept finding a woman dancing. Don't feel pressure to find that. You may find I've done this workshop with I think 5 different groups now, and every time every person was able to do something. And some people have found trees, people have found leaves and flames and faces and oceans and fish and all kinds of things. So don't put pressure on yourself. The point here is to receive. We're resting and we're receiving. So look at it from different perspectives. Just take time to breathe and listen to the parts of yourself that maybe don't always get a hearing. That's just like, oh, this reminds me of something. That's okay. That's what we're listening to today. Instincts are welcome, and emotions are welcome, and unspoken kind of urges are welcome, along with our intellect. So let's take 5 minutes now to just sit with what we've got in front of us and to look at it and receive whatever might want to emerge from the lines for us today. Okay, so now hopefully we are ready to respond. If you didn't find anything that really feels like it's calling you to do something with it, that's fine. You can start again, or you can just doodle other things that you didn't find in it. That's fine too. So this is the respond moment now. So we've received, we've rested, we've set aside our own agendas, we've relaxed and we've slowed. And then we've just listened, waited to receive, and now we get to respond. So I love this possibility that God does invite us to partner with him in the world, and we get to decide now which colors we bring to this. He might have shared something with us, and now we get to have a part to let it be spoken through our own personality and choices. And that's a beautiful thing, that we get to partner with him in that way. And so whatever it was that you were finding among the lines, listen to that childlike instinct in yourself that's just really wanting to make something blue or green for no apparent reason. When we were small, before we lost our joy for making things, we just listened to whatever our hand wanted to reach for, and for some reason today was a day to make something green, and we didn't have to answer the question of why. So find that part in yourself again, and if something just wants to be red, make it red, and you don't have to say why. So now we get to get out our colors, whether you have pencils or crayons or oil pastels or whatever you have there. Now bring out the colors and bring it to life. And yes, you can take some what's the word, poetic license or creative license. You can add a few things. If it almost looks like something but the black line isn't there, that's okay. You can make it do what it needs to do to become what you're sensing is emerging from these lines. So take the time to just let those things emerge and become colorful. In the next, we'll give you probably 15 or 20 minutes now to take the time to do that. So there's time, there's no need to hurry here. If you want to make more than one, that's a great thing too. So enjoy this next 15 or 20 minutes to just respond now and jump into the collaboration in the creativity with God. Well, I hope that that was a meaningful process, even if you don't particularly like what it is that you have on the page in front of you. I trust that there's been something that's been meaningful and engaging even in the process. Even if it was frustrating, I think there's something that's a learning opportunity in even the frustrations as well. There have been conversations I've had with people who've done this before who have said, I just could not stop controlling things. I could not stop, just respond. And if that's what we've learned from this experience, that's a really important lesson as well. So maybe this is something that would be a good practice to keep doing over and over again, and to help yourself discover it. It's a nice way to kind of minimize the ways that we are experiencing that every day into an exercise like this to kind of practice it. It's almost like walking a labyrinth. I love the fact that a labyrinth is different from a maze because you can't really get lost in a labyrinth. There's really only one path. It's a very confusing path, and you can't really anticipate where it's going to lead you, but it is leading in a particular way. Just like that is kind of a practice for life, how life has a path that we can't see the outcomes for, but trusting that there is a way that God is leading us. To walk a labyrinth is kind of a mini version of what it means to live our lives. This also can be a contemplative practice that's helping us just practice those skills of resting, of receiving, and then responding. So if it's meaningful, I'd like to give an opportunity. We're going to break now into groups of 4 or so for each person to have 2 minutes to just share what you saw emerging. If you were frustrated, it's okay to share that as well. If maybe this resonates with a song you've been singing lately, or a passage you've been reading lately, or a conversation you've had lately, or something you've sensed God doing in your life, that's wonderful. Share that if you feel comfortable doing so. If it just became a nice picture, that's fine too. If it became nothing at all, that's fine too. And if you prefer not to share in your small group, that's fine. Just say pass. I would encourage you to share it with somebody maybe in your life afterwards if you're comfortable with that. So we'll take about 8 minutes now so that our groups of 4, each person can have 2 minutes, and we'll put some prompts in the breakout so that you know when it's time to move along. So take some time now to share with the folks in your group what you've watched emerging and how you've rested and received and responded. Well, my prayer is that this has been meaningful to you. I do trust that the Spirit of God is powerful and is working in each of us, that although this was one workshop, that we each have different personalities and different needs, and we're at different stages of life and ministry, and somehow that same Spirit knows how to meet us in just the way that we need it for this time. And so my prayer is that there is something in this that God has invited you into, that this has made you not just want to do this kind of exercise more, but made you want to step into that rest, receive, respond habit in your daily life, beginning every day with rest, beginning every meeting with rest, so that we can receive and respond to join God in mission with Him every single day. And I'd just like to close with a word of prayer. If you would like to add your picture to the Facebook page, it's not a business for me or anything. I just do it as a way to share this, as a way of sharing the prayers that were behind the art. And there's all kinds of people from different workshops who have shared their things on there. So if you'd like to, you can find it on Facebook at Ecclesia Dancers. If you'd find that meaningful, you can go there and check out what other people have made as well, to see their prayers and their resting and receiving and responding. So let me close with prayer now. Our good God, we thank you that you are a God of all creation, that your Spirit is flourishing in the world even when we can't see it, that you are not wringing your hands, that although you lament with us, you long with us, you also have such a joy as you make all things new. You see where it's all headed, and you know what you have in store for us, and we thank you for that. We thank you for inviting us into this work of making all things new with you, of being on mission, on adventure with you in the world. We repent, Lord, from the ways that we have tried to do this in our own strength, for the ways that we have tried to carry the yoke alone. And Lord, we need your help to just be released from the world's way of carrying that yoke. Help us to step into the yoke as Jesus invites us, to rest in him, to receive from him, and to respond with him in joyful partnership with you. And so, Father, I bless every person on this call. I bless whatever it is that you have been doing in them in this time. And I send them out with blessing, that they would see you in more ways in their daily work, that they would know how to partner with you, that they would be invited into your rest, and that from that rest they would receive new insight, new vision, new power and energy and peace from you, to partner with you in new ways, responding in this world to your prompts every day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.